how much is AI going to impact my life as a radiologist?
What's all this hype about interventional radiology?
I would much rather be the person who founds an organization like MSF than be the person who works for an organization like MSF, but make an impact. Do something alongside your medicine. Give back to the community. A society grows great when old men plant trees whose shade they know they shall never sit in.
Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah. Assalamu alaikum everybody, and welcome back to the Muslim Medics Journal, the space where we dive into the inspiring stories of healthcare professionals across the globe, and we combine our faith, medicine, and our community to provide you with stories that will inspire. My name is Nouman.
And I'm Yasser, and today we're joined by Dr Omer Elhassan, a radiology registrar who's worked across various medical and surgical specialities before choosing radiology. He's very involved in Muslim leadership and youth work, as well as being a previous president of his ISOC during uni. So we've got a lot of things to talk about, Omar. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Thank you for having me, guys.
So let's dive straight into it. So you're doing radiology now, Omar.
Indeed.
But that wasn't a direct route. You meandered a lot along your journey, following foundation years, doing, I think, what was it, 4 years around?
Yeah,
locuming?
Yeah, 4 years of locuming.
So talk to us. Why did you locum for so long? Why did you land on radiology? What happened?
So it's an interesting story with lots of facets, but to keep it simple, to be fair, we've all been there, GCSEs, A-level, university. You've been on a treadmill for 10 years. You know, F3 was a given for me. I'm too relaxed to kind of be a gunner, go to conferences and try and get my application straight in. So F3 was a given. The F4 came around too soon, so I was like, F4 is going to happen too. And you're enjoying the money, got married, alhamdulillah. And then after that, I was just a couple more years was mostly for my wife. She was doing her foundation program. So I decided not to go for a specialty yet, keep locuming. And then eventually, ended up picking radiology for lots of reasons.
Okay, nice. So you kind of took your time and made an informed decision, which I think maybe is contrary to a lot of people. I don't know. I guess a lot of people do extra foundation years, but there is definitely that kind of mindset where we need to rush into our speciality and get it in as short time as possible, because I guess speciality training is not short, it's kind of long. So you want to get on a post as soon as possible. So
So my personal opinion is counter to that, actually.
Right.
I think your working career will be 30, 40 years of your life. An extra year or two at the beginning to get it right, to pick the right thing. I don't think it's a problem at all, personally. So I'd say, look, if you're confident about what you want to do, go for it. Go for the speciality. If you're not confident about what specialty you want to do, or even if you want to stay in medicine, take your time. Take a year out, take 2 years, breathe, keep yourself working, earning some money, but give yourself the space to really stop and think. Like I said, that treadmill that you're on in terms of revision and study, it doesn't stop. It's the first time that you've had a chance to actually stop, take a breather, look around at what's going on in the world. Personally, I'm not even too focused on medicine, I think probably you guys and the listeners to the podcast are probably the type of people that also have interests outside of medicine. Give yourself a chance to explore it. I think that's probably a wise thing to do.
So you've mentioned that you did a lot of locuming. You've done residencies in surgery, A&E, stroke medicine. What made you decide to settle finally on radiology?
So when I came through medical school, I kind of was most engaged with things like ITU and emergency medicine. I'm a relaxed kind of character, but I like the kind of the chaos and the, and the toys that they have in ITU or the fancy gadgetry, right? And I love the anaesthetist personality. They walk around in flip-flops, very chill, the exact opposite of a surgeon. So that attracted me. But having kind of done F3, F4, F5, F6, realizing that actually my priorities probably lay outside of medicine. I didn't want to commit the 7 to 8 years it would take to be an ITU consultant or a ITU/ED consultant. Radiology for me was a good mix of a few things. It's a relatively short training program. You're still a hospitalist. You still get the toys and all the machinery. especially if you do intervention. So I think within the medical specialities, it was probably the most fit for my lifestyle and for what I wanted out of the future. I want to do things outside of medicine, and radiology seemed to be a good fit for that. So that's kind of why radiology.
Okay, that's very interesting. You've mentioned how many different gadgets you get to work with. One thing that nowadays is coming into the forefront of radiology and medicine in general, actually, is the use of AI. There are lots of fears, regarding AI and how it may take over jobs, even within medicine and the medical sector. Where do you think this kind of industry is headed in the next 5 to 10 years?
So how is AI going to impact and kill all the radiologists? So look, reality is AI is coming. It's going to make a big impact on the world. And when I was applying, this is something I thought about a lot. How much is AI going to impact my life as a radiologist? I always say, look, don't be afraid of it. Generally have a positive attitude, but don't be afraid of it. By the time AI can do a radiologist's job, it could do most people's jobs. Maybe not most medics, but most jobs in society. Probably, low-level lawyers, solicitors, accounting, tax, that kind of stuff. A lot of these kind of white-collar jobs. Society will look so different that I almost don't care what it does to radiology. I think that the rest of society will be so radically different that I think we're going to just have to see what happens and see what comes, basically, and deal with it. At the moment, it's being used, but not very widespread. The things that are very common at the moment are, you might have seen Viz IQ. In Nottingham, you probably will have seen it for CT heads. So the AI will look at a CT head before a radiologist does.
Right.
And will pick out, it will say if it can find an intracranial hemorrhage, can it find a bleed?
How successful, or how successful is that technology?
So it's actually reasonably good. In my very brief experience as an ST1 radiologist,
right.
It is reasonably good at picking out when something is normal, and it can tell you when something is kind of unusual. However, what is unusual, it may or may not get wrong. So I don't know if you want to go into kind of the depths of it, but on a CT head, blood looks whiter than the other stuff, right? So it might say, it will see some white bits and say, oh, there's a bleed here. But whether it is or isn't a bleed, that's kind of something that sometimes it will get wrong. It might be something else. It might be a cavernoma or a meningioma or a metastases in the brain or something like that. It's used apparently in breast a lot, but that's not something breast radiology, something I have a lot of familiarity with at the moment. So it is being used, and hospitals are trying to figure it out how to. But I don't think our jobs are at risk in the near future.
Okay. So there's still a role for radiology.
Yeah, why not? Worst case scenario, we'll all do intervention and just invade the vascular surgeons.
I mean,
them, right?
That was also another thing we had on the list as well. Interventional radiology. I feel like it's almost a buzzword now. I hear it all the time. Interventional radiology. Yeah. What's all this hype about interventional radiology?
I really think it's quite cool. Yeah, so it's a really cool field. So it's quite new as medical fields go. The oldest consultants who are currently retiring are probably some of the first generations to really do it. But the idea of interventional radiology is, can we do some kind of invasive procedure in a less invasive way than we used to do it?
Yep.
So in kind of abdominal surgery, we used to have open surgery, and then we kind of, some clever surgeon said, oh, why don't I just put like a camera into the abdomen and then some scissors in, and I can get away with not opening the abdomen. So you had keyhole surgery. This is essentially the next step in that evolution is, well, actually, I don't need to get to many places in the body. I could just put a small needle into, I don't know, say the radial artery, a femoral artery, or somewhere else. And using kind of common Seldinger techniques that people do,
yes,
I can get some tools through those vessels all the way to wherever I need them to be. So the common things that people do are, say, mechanical thrombectomy of strokes. There's embolization of kind of brain aneurysms.
Yeah.
So you literally through the radial artery all the way up, and you can follow it with your X-rays as you go up into the kind of right area. You put a coil in. There's things like TACE where there's a lesion in the liver. So we can go in there through the veins, through the arteries, go to that particular lesion by following the arteries, which is essentially just a road network, right? And you can put chemotherapy right in that lesion, as opposed to give someone systemic,
yeah, with all
which
the
is
side effects.
Exactly, yeah. So there's lots of really cool things that you can do and are being developed even. We could talk about it for ages, but I think it's a really cool thing. And most young radiologists now probably will end up doing some form of intervention from minor to major. Does that make sense? Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's almost inspiring, like learning how doctors have figured out ways to treat patients and do surgeries in less and less invasive ways. And, it's very inventive, keyhole surgery and all of the different techniques that you've mentioned. Were these factors that you thought about when you decided to do radiology? How has your opinion on studying radiology changed as time has progressed? Is that your main focus at the moment?
Is it my main focus? No, I probably shouldn't say because my TPD might be listening. But no, it's not my main focus. I love radiology. I love medicine, but it's not my main focus in life. That said, I have enjoyed kind of ST1 it's a 5 to 6 year training program, depending on if you do intervention. ST1 is a very chill year because everyone knows you don't know anything. You're just doing teaching for literally probably about 40 to 50% of the week. You're doing teaching of some form or another. And you can basically ask stupid questions. It's brilliant, right? So I've very much enjoyed it so far. Next year in August, that's when the heavy lifting comes in, and I'm on nights, and me and another senior reg are looking after the whole hospital. So ask me again in a year, I'll let you know.
Okay, so you say you have passions outside of radiology, and what are those passions? What do you want your legacy to be, kind of your whole career?
Okay, that's interesting. So Yasser, if I was to ask you, why did you come into medicine? If you gave me a one sentence.
I'd say it's a pretty quick way of making a nice impact on people's lives.
Okay, brilliant.
You're treating people.
Okay, I like that. Now, man, what would you, if I was to ask you the same question, why did you come into medicine?
I think it was a mixture of different things, Diagnostic side always interested me, but it's also the people interaction, one-on-one, face-to-face, helping people as they progress through their lives.
Brilliant. Okay, so you've mentioned helping people. Yasser mentioned having an impact in the same way, to some extent, helping people. And I think that's very much why I got into medicine in the first place. I wanted to help people. I was born in Sudan originally. My dad came over here to study, master's, PhD, that kind of thing. We came with him. We ended up staying in the UK, but we'd go back quite regularly. And when we go back, we'd go to my grandma's village, wouldn't stay in the city. And I used to love it. But imagine literally what you probably imagine from the media. Mud brick houses, no electricity, me and my cousins running around, playing in the mud, etc., right? It always struck me that I had better opportunities than my cousins there. Even though they were equally as intelligent, equally as capable, they're human beings of value, but they probably wouldn't get anywhere in life because of where they were born, the systems, etc., etc. So I always wanted to help them. And when I'd speak to my parents, they were like, yeah, you help them by studying medicine. And that made a lot of sense to 10-year-old me, right? Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, help medicine, do medicine, make them better, right? And then you get a bit older and you realize maybe mum telling me to do that was just about securing my future. But actually, who's thinking about securing their future, my family back home? What can a medic do? How can I help them as a doctor? Like imagine you're an ophthalmologist and they do kind of lens surgery, right? Take out cataracts, replace with a artificial lens. Very short procedure, probably something in the order of like 15 to 30 minutes.
Yep.
If you did a whole clinic, let's say you took your month annual leave that you get, and you did a clinic in Sudan, and you had all the equipment and all that kind of stuff, and you did a free clinic, right? Half an hour, 10 hours a day, seeing 20 patients.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's say you did that for 30 days straight. You're treating 600 people.
Yep.
That's a good number of people. The person who started MSF, you've heard of MSF?
Yes.
How many people do you think that person's helped?
I mean,
600?
In the order of tens,
Yeah.
hundreds of thousands.
Yeah,
probably.
a few more than 600, yeah.
Definitely.
At least 601.
Definitely.
Yeah, exactly. So this is what I kind of learned about myself. And this is another reason I encourage you to take some time out after foundation program. I learned about myself that I like thinking big picture. I don't want to help 600 people in a month, and that's all I can do a year. I would much rather be the person who founds an organization like MSF than be the person who works for an organization like MSF. If you have the skills to leverage your connections, you know, funding, organizational skills, and you can bring people together, the amount of effort that you put in, it's multiplied by the efforts of those other peoples and those skills, and you can have a much bigger impact on the world. And for me specifically, a much bigger impact on Sudan. What's that ayah of the Quran where if you plant a seed, that seed sprouts and produces 7 ears of corn. Each one has a innumerable amount of seeds.
Yes.
Right? We should be those seeds. I think Islamically, when we talk about ihsan comes in multiple formats. It's be very good at what you do, the medicine, the surgery, the radiology. Actually, on a societal level, what does it mean to have ihsan? On a societal level, right? It means have the biggest impact you can have. Do the most good that you can do. So some of us have those skill sets, or at least they're latent within us, right? And if we were to think about how we can best use those to get the most benefit, personally, I'm convinced, at least for me, it's outside of medicine.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
That does make sense.
What do you think, Aman? Get the conversation going.
Very profound words. You've mentioned the impact that people who are outside of medicine, who aren't necessarily even doctors, can have in the medical sphere, and the importance of leveraging those skills that you may have been able to develop across the years as a student, as a medical student and a doctor. And I think for us, it's very relevant as well. We all, amongst ourselves, we try to be as involved in the community as possible. How has your perception of community work and involvement been throughout the years, starting as a student, going up to a doctor? Have you always had that mentality where you want to help as many people as possible? Or was it something that developed over time?
Yeah, brilliant. That's a very interesting conversation in and of itself. There's this one word that I love in the Arabic language, himma. A little bit hard to define, but to me it means a sense of responsibility. I'm the eldest of 5 kids, born to parents who flew over from Sudan. My mum she got a secondary school education and wasn't allowed to study any further. She came to this country as a 20-year-old girl from a village in Sudan. And my dad got sick, unfortunately, while we were living in the UK. Not majorly sick, he's still with us, alhamdulillah, but he got sick.
Yep.
My mum had to work 3 jobs as a 20-year-old woman.
Wow.
SubhanAllah.
In a country where she didn't really speak the language. She didn't have any skills, right? So she worked as a factory worker. She worked teaching Quran. She worked teaching Arabic. 3 jobs a week. Meanwhile, she was also looking after, at the time, me and my younger brother and my father. No access to kind of public funds or benefits or anything like that. I remember from my childhood always having a sense of, I need to do something. I need to change something. I need to help. It's echoed through all kind of different stages. When I'd go back to Sudan, I'd think about my cousins and the people of Sudan and say, I need to help. I need to change something. In my own house, it was the same way. So I've always had this sense of something needs to change, things need to be improved, and there's no use looking at other people to do it for you. So I always had that sense of responsibility over myself, of I need to do something. I need to make changes. And personally, I think that, although I would say this, wouldn't I? But I think that is something very important that we should be giving to our children, our youth, the Muslim community at large. The Prophet ﷺ was that example for us, right? He wasn't the person that would say, oh, okay, everything's fine as it is. He would make the change. He would make the sacrifice. He would suffer the consequences of that to make the world a better place. So I forgot what the question even was, but that's my answer to it.
No, I agree with your point, because we are put in a position where, alhamdulillah, we're in a very safe country, very stable country. We're not worried about having electricity, about having basic things like food and water and stuff. So we've been given this blessing and all these blessings. We can't just coast along and just be doctors. You have to do a bit more. And I feel like on the Day of Judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ask us, what did you do with all these blessings I gave you? We're not kind of in a survival mindset. We should be in a thriving mindset.
Absolutely.
So I feel like, I don't know, hopefully by doing something like a podcast like this, by going into, maybe this is another topic to talk about, going into public health consulting, management, that kind of thing within medicine that can make a wider arching impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Consulting broadly, I've considered in the past.
Right.
I opted. So, I mean, for those of you who have ever looked into that world, there's three major companies: McKinsey, Bain, and BCG, who are the kind of big players of the consulting world, management consultancy. I thought about it. I bought the books. I was going to sit there. I think it's called the GMAT or the GAMSAT, whatever they call it. I decided not to after a conversation with a very interesting guy. This might be going off on a tangent. But do you know one of those people who's completed LinkedIn?
Right.
LinkedIn
Clocked
warriors.
it, bro. Yeah?
LinkedIn warrior.
Yeah. Like this guy, undergrad at Cambridge, postgrad at Oxford, masters at like Harvard,
Wow, mashallah.
urology consultant. And he was a manager at McKinsey, right? Best of all, he was Sudanese, right? So I was like, I got to get this guy. So I was like, I got to get this guy and have a chat with him. And, you know, I reached out to him on LinkedIn. He was very happy to have a chat. And I told him, I was like, oh, you know, I want to do this in Sudan in the future, et cetera, but I want to gain these management skills. So I was thinking, let me apply for McKinsey, for a consulting post, get these skills and then go and use those elsewhere. He said a very interesting thing to me. I don't know how politically correct this is, but he was like, Omar, you're waiting for permission from these people, from these organizations, from white people. You can cut that out if you want. You're waiting for permission from these people to tell you that you're good enough to go and do something. Forget it. Go and do it. If you go spend those years that you were going to spend in consulting actually on the ground, trying stuff, seeing what works, what doesn't work, you'll make a better job of it than if you spend some time working in the corporate world. Again, I don't know what the question was, but you mentioned consulting.
You're definitely on track. We were talking about consulting and that wider arching, because there's no shortage of doctors back home.
Absolutely.
Especially I've traveled to various countries in the Middle East and I've seen that they have too many doctors who can't even get foundation year training and, you know, the equivalent they have. Because everyone over there, you know, when there's economic instability, everyone's going to try and usher your kid into doing something stable like medicine. Totally valid. But there's still major healthcare insufficiencies in these countries. So there's no shortage of doctors. It's just about creating those systems.
Exactly.
And, you know, maybe doing that through consulting, through something like that is the way to go, perhaps.
Through all sorts, yes. I guess you've not asked this question, but what would I encourage your listeners to do is when I say take that year out, really take that year out. It's not a year just to mess about, play PlayStation, you know, earn that sweet locum money, do all of that stuff, right? But this is a year, you know, you mentioned Allah has given us these blessings of being in a stable country, having access to some of the best universities in the world. You know, Allah's going to ask you about those blessings. What's life about if not serving Allah? How best can you do that? With your skill set, with the things that you're interested in, and we'll all be interested in different things. Clearly, I'm very I like big picture thinking. Some people aren't like that, and that's absolutely fine. The Sahaba themselves were different. Some of them were warriors, some of them were merchants, some of them were poets. Think about what you want to do in life, how you can have the biggest impact you can have. What are you going to say to Allah when He asks, what did you do with those blessings? Take that time out, take that F3, which I think most people do these days anyway, right? Think about that stuff, explore those skills. And, you know, I don't want to push the kind of whole go back home and do something, because even in this country, even if you decide to focus on the UK, that's fine, focus on the UK, but make an impact. Do something alongside your medicine, give back to the community, whether that's youth work, education of some sort, whether it's getting involved in politics, local politics, international politics, whether that's working with NGOs or charities, whether that's starting businesses or community organizations. We need to build those institutions. One of my favorite sayings is, and I don't know who said it, a society grows great when old men plant trees whose shade they know they shall never sit in. Mm-hmm. Right? Rome wasn't built in a day. Islam wasn't built in a day. Nothing was built in a day. What are you going to leave as a legacy? What are you going to leave for the next generation? What are you going to give them so that they can climb on your shoulders as like we climbed on the shoulders of giants? Think about that stuff. That's my best advice at the moment. It's a challenge to balance things, I'll be honest with you. And it's something I still struggle with to this day. Like, We're all young people here. I'm slightly older than you guys and I'm getting fatter. But, I'm 30 years old. Managing this stuff is a real challenge. When I started med school, humble brag, my first year, I was like, okay, cool. Top, what was it, second decile or something. And I got involved in ISOC from my second year, and I got more and more involved in different things. And my grades went down and down and down and down and down. And the first exam I ever failed in my life was med school finals. That was the year that I was FOSIS Midlands chair, as they called it. So managing that stuff is challenging, right? It's not easy, but I don't regret any of it. I don't regret getting involved in my ISOCs and watching my grades drop, or getting involved in FOSIS and watching my grades drop. Alhamdulillah, I still made the grade, right? What do you call a doctor that finishes bottom of his year?
Doctor.
All right,
True.
doctor. So I'm still a doctor. But those skills that I gained in those areas, and whether it be managing people or kind of just interacting with people, the connections I made, the friendships I made, that are still strong to this day. I've got a bunch of the guys coming around my house tomorrow. I don't regret any of that. You will struggle to manage, but that's normal. If you're not struggling, I'd be worried about you. Maybe struggling is part of the process. Maybe that stretch of your own kind of time and division and your time management skills and, having to kind of dial that in, maybe that's a good thing, No one gets to the top of their game in any field without struggle. They say a lot about boxers and sportsmen. It's easy to understand with those guys, right? Every boxer who's been world champion has probably been knocked out many times, right? Has taken many punches to the head. That's normal. You're going to take some punches to the head in this life, man. Like, don't. Life will have problems. It's, to some extent, it's about what problems you want to deal with. You cannot get involved in your community. But then the problems you might face is what happens when you have children and you don't have a tight-knit community around you, and there's no local madrasa, or there's no local kind of community activities for kids. What are the problems you're going to have? Your kids are going to struggle, right? So what struggle do you want? Do you want to work hard and stretch yourself so you can build those things? Or do you want to work hard later trying to herd your children like cats?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What are some of those things you think need to be focused on? So say there's me, the average Joe medical student, let's say average Mo.
Average Mo, yeah.
There you go. And I'm listening to Dr. Omer saying we need to struggle a bit more. We need to go out of our way. We need to start building communities. What should this average Mo, third-year medical student with a bit of time on his hands get involved with? Are there specific organizations? Should he find a local mosque and start a youth halaqa, which is something you've been involved in? What's the way to go? What do you think?
So this bit is a bit personal because everyone has different skills, different interests. So I can't claim to have a one answer for everyone. What I would say as a start though is, what are you interested in? What's your skill set, and what's the highest aspiration that you can have in that area? Yasser, I know you've been involved with kind of youth work and things like that yourself. If you think back to when you were a kid, the reason you probably got involved is you valued that service that was given to you when you were a kid.
Definitely.
Right? Same for me. That's how I got into youth work to some extent. I had some kind of mentors in a sense. Lads who were probably back in the day, I don't know, they were probably about 20, 25 themselves, but they were important for my development. So I wanted to give that back to the youth. So one question maybe is, okay, well, what have you received that's been useful for you? Can you get involved and continue that process and give it back to the next generation? That might be a way to think about it. Another way to think about it is, okay, just where's your interest? Stretch yourself it can mean many different things, right? If you have an interest in finance, okay, well, actually stretch that. Don't just have an interest by, okay, I'm just going to read books. Okay, go and maybe, I don't know, find some other people from a finance society, try and start a business. Stretch yourself, do something difficult. I'm just struggling. What other interests might people have? I don't know. Sports,
yeah.
Sports, okay. Can I do something through that to either stretch myself or give back to the community? Just think of, how can I give back? How can I stretch myself? How can I develop skills? This doesn't apply to medics too much. It applies to other people in other degrees. I always say this to them. We produce how many graduates, engineering graduates every single year? And they're all applying for the same jobs. Your Rolls Royces and your, these big engineering companies. What differentiates you? Because it's not going to be your first, even if you get first.
Yeah.
Probably 20% of people get first. So So what makes you different? And what often it is what they're looking for is your character, your leadership skills, your ability to communicate, public speaking skills. You know, have you done anything difficult that proves that actually you're capable? You're not just smart and book smart. You can actually get things done. Think about that. Doesn't apply as much to medics, but it might do in the future, the way the job market's going.
Yeah, true.
Think about these things earlier, right?
That's a good point. So yeah, I think we can relate to some of those experiences you're talking about. I mean, where I grew up, the local uni students made a youth club for like local teenagers, but it wasn't really Islamically oriented necessarily. They did lots of soft skills activities, like to do with arts and craft and public speaking and getting involved in local food banks and this kind of thing. And those kind of shaped me a lot.
Yeah.
Even though it wasn't necessarily Islamically focused, the sessions had those sprinkled in, you know, times for prayer and stuff. But I think that really helped me, and maybe something we can give as well. I think you had similar.
Yeah,
Did you have something similar in your childhood?
Absolutely, very similar actually. When I was younger, we also had youth clubs, and I'm based in London, but you know, we had lessons from a sheikh that always came first. He would teach us something about the prophets, about their lives. And you know, growing up as a kid, you don't often get that kind of education anywhere, because your parents, they push you to learn Quran, they push you to memorize verses, but in terms of learning the stories of the Prophet, the seerah, you don't really get that unless you go to a madrasa. So for me, the youth club, in that regard, it helped me a lot. But at the same time, it doubled up, and they made sure that the kids remained engaged outside of purely Islamic activities. So for us, they'd organize sessions of football in the local power league or the local golds, you know, whatever you want to call it. You know, they did jiu-jitsu sessions, you know, very basic ones, kept the kids engaged, kept them active, and really developed that kind of love for the community and made sure that people always came back. And you'd find that across the years, so as I grew up, obviously, the youth club becomes something for the youth, it becomes something for people younger than me. But I'd still visit here and there, and you'd see that the same students that were learning at the same time as me when they were young, 11, 12 years old, fast forward 10 years later, now they're the ones leading it. So some of my close friends, they're the ones leading those sessions. They're the ones ensuring that the students and the kids still keep coming. So in that regard, it's very, very important to kind of engage and be passionate about your community. You've described yourself as ambitious and passionate about changing the world. I want to ask you, you know, what does success look to you? How does success look to you? And how has it changed as you've grown older?
That is a great question, man. I've changed a lot as I've got older. I'll say older, you know, 20 to 30. It's a big change. Like I said, I've got married not recently, but, you know, I got married in my 20s. Life changes. You lose some of the naivety that you had as a youngster, perhaps. You know, they say, you know, Islamically, you reach adulthood at age 40, right? I think part of it is that development, maturation of your worldview. Success is very difficult to define, and it's individual. What would be success for me? Like if I was dying, if I was brought on the day of judgment, I could say, what would I be happy with? Maybe if I can say that I lived a life whereby I was able to help. I mean, success is in the hands of Allah. Allah doesn't judge us based on our successes, judge us based on our efforts, right? So if you can say that you tried, you put in the effort, then I think you can be happy with that. However, what does success look like in a sense of material stuff or actual achievements? I'd love to be able to say, improve people's healthcare in Sudan through some kind of health tech solution, right? We can go into the specifics of it, but seeing my people be healthier, seeing Sudan kind of gets back on its feet, helping to build institutions there. And it might just be within healthcare, who knows? You know, maybe sometimes you're still somewhat limited. I'm unlikely to be president of Sudan. Although if anyone, you know, we're getting democracy, why not throw my hat in the ring, right? Joking. But yeah, one, being able to say that you put the effort in and you genuinely tried. Two, being able to actually see some impact and to have built an institution and have something that when I die will carry on. So if you can build something, a health tech app that can connect people to doctors and to healthcare, provisions, and because of that they're healthier, because of that the rates of malaria are lower, or the rates of death are lower, in childhood mortality, peripartum mortality, whatever it is, whatever measures you want to use. I've not defined that yet, but if I can achieve something there that's measurable, I'll be very pleased. Even less than that, if I can have made an impact on that society and allowed other people to be more ambitious, I'll be happy with that. Alhamdulillah. Right now, I'm still very young. We're all very young. It's hard to define success, isn't it? But
that's it. It's just having that conversation, just so we can see where we can all specialize in, whether that be something here, something back home.
There's a interesting hadith, if I could bring it up. One of probably my favorite hadith. You might know it, and the Arabic escapes my mind right now. But in essence, it's a hadith that says that if the horn of the hour, if the hour was to come upon you, as in the day of judgment is here, you are aware now that the horn is being blown. This is that day of judgment, and you've got a sapling in your hand. Then you should plant it. Have you heard that one before?
Yes.
Have you heard this one?
New to me.
Okay. What's the point of a sapling, though, man? Do you know what I mean by sapling, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah. What's the point of it? Why do you plant a sapling?
so that it can grow in the future.
Exactly. The future will give you shade. It will give you fruit. It will give you sustenance. It will be something useful, right? The hours come. We're all going to, time's literally up. All time is up now, right?
Yeah.
There's literally 0 point in doing that. So
Yeah.
it's not going to grow. It's not going to give you shade. It's not going to give you. So why does Allah or the Prophet ﷺ recommend that we plant it anyway? What was it? Message is he trying to get across there? What do you think?
I think it's the efforts that you put in
Exactly.
yourself, regardless of the outcome.
Exactly that. The issue of Palestine is very topical right now. Allah's not going to ask us, why didn't you free Palestine? Because that's not in our control. But he might ask you, what did you do for the people of Palestine? I put you in England. I gave you a university education. I gave you money. I gave you a stable career. What did you do with it? Did you put any effort to anything? Or did you just buy a house in West Bridgford and get a lovely car, and send your kids to the boys' high school? What do we want out of life? What does Allah want us to have out of life? It's questions we should ask ourselves.
SubhanAllah, some hard-hitting questions, but very important at the same time.
MedicLaunch is honoured to sponsor the Muslim Medic Journal. Medical education at your fingertips, looking for something to transform your clinical ward rounds, a question bank that will transform your MLA success? MedicLaunch.com is your first stop, all-in-one comprehensive platform to build clinical knowledge early. MedicLaunch.com, sign up today for a free trial and get an exclusive discount just for TMMJ podcast viewers from us at MedicLaunch.
Sometimes I like to talk about the challenges, because sometimes I came in quite naively. When I came back from, FOSIS, if you're aware of FOSIS, okay, so I was head of my Islamic Society. I went to, run FOSIS Midlands for a little bit. Came back to Nottingham because I was in Leicester, and I was very excited. I was like, I'm going to go to my local masjid. I've got great plans of how to make it more engaging, right? We're going to have elections in the masjid. We're going to, have people on little subcommittees like an ISOC, right?
Yeah.
And then it's going to be great because people are going to get involved in the masjid. And the uncles looked at me and said, sit down, little boy. Right? In essence, that's what was said, right?
Yeah.
So, bro, they slapped me down hard, right? Young people were energetic. And sometimes we're a bit naive to how the world works. This will happen to you guys if you go back to your communities and you try and get involved. Sometimes this will happen.
Yeah, definitely.
I think be ready for that challenge. Be ready that it's not going to be smooth, Maybe I had this, what's the word, not God complex, like a savior hero complex. When I came in, I was like, I know best. I've done all these fancy things now. I'm going to come and tell these uncles, Wagwan, right? It don't happen like that, bro. It don't happen like that. So, but still, you have to expect that this might happen. Find a place that you can, where the vision, where the kind of the upside is so inspiring to you, that it's going to allow you to kind of get through these tough times. Like, because I cared about, the youth work, even when the uncles weren't necessarily very helpful, where the rest of because I reached out to a lot of people in Nottingham, like, I want you to help me do this. Alhamdulillah, at least one or two brothers were very, very helpful, and they kind of run it. In fact, they ran it for longer than I did, right? Most people kind of didn't really engage. That disappointment can sometimes be quite disheartening.
Is this with regards to the youth club?
Yeah.
So you had a youth club in a...
Exactly. Yeah, in a local masjid. I wanted to like make it a little bit fancy, not fancy, but I wanted to think about having a curriculum, and maybe, the masjid, there's a bit at the back. I was like, maybe we could turn that into a little youth club, get some, the things that go in youth clubs, etc., etc.
Yeah.
None of that. They were just like, bro, stop talking, stop planning, just do a class. Just do a class.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But I think that is when you said reflect on the things you had when you were younger and think what would be useful to you. I think one of the things that I had a bit but would also be very, very useful is for every single young person, young Muslim growing up, especially in the West, to be in some sort of youth group or some sort of halaqah or something. It doesn't have to be too regular, just drop in. Just that space where they can ask questions. So, for example, when I was in school, I remember some of my friends, my non-Muslim friends, would ask me these pertinent questions, right? And then I wouldn't know how to respond to them. And as a teenager, when you're a teenager, your worldview is being shaped at that point. It would kind of shake me a bit.
Yeah, naturally. It's really important. There's a few kind of things I guess I'll touch on there is, you mentioned when you're a kid, you don't generally speak to your parents. Like, if you have any kind of like slightly out of the box questions, you don't speak to your parents. There's just too much baggage there, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have someone who's older and wiser and maybe kind of, is a good guide, who do you ask? You ask your friends. Like, if you're lucky and they're kind of good lads, good girls, great. If you're not, you're knackered, man. This is where peer pressure comes into it, right? We all know Muslims who have kind of gone down the wrong path, ended up kind of not where they should be, probably not where they even wanted to be. But just through kind of that slow peer pressure and kind of societal pressure, they end up, where they are. Do you know what I mean by the word epistemology?
Could you define that, please?
I probably couldn't define it as per the Oxford Dictionary, but it's the kind of the way you look at the world, or the way that you gain knowledge. That might be ontology. I don't know. Some philosopher will be able to define it in the comments below. Like, share, and subscribe, guys.
Amazing.
But I always think, okay, what is my personal aim out of these youth groups? At the end of the day, I want them to have an Islamic outlook on life. That means everything that they look at from here onwards should be with the Islamic lens on, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So whenever they come across a new problem, they can to some extent solve it themselves, because they understand that Islam is a way of life. It's not about doing hifz and your sabki and your sabak and all that kind of thing, right? And getting battered by the Quran teacher if you didn't get it, right? It's not about, just being battered by my parents if I didn't pray the whole today. Mum comes into the room and slaps you awake and you have to go pray Fajr. This is a way of life. This is a way that we should live our lives economically, legally, societally, ethically, etc., etc. If they can understand that, look, Islam is a whole way of life, and Allah is concerned about us and about our well-being and our welfare, and the things that we do, the ritualistic aspects, the salah, the psalm, the hifz, that's all well and good, and that's brilliant. But it shouldn't be the emphasis.
Mm-hmm.
It really shouldn't be the emphasis, my personal opinion, as a 30-year-old man, so take it with a pinch of salt. I'm not a community elder yet. But it rankles me when like the kid goes to a mosque and is a hafiz, doesn't understand a word of Arabic, hasn't really, read the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, hasn't really understood anything, but they've spent 5 years memorizing the Quran. That's crazy to me. If anything, start with that other stuff. The message of the Prophet ﷺ, when it came in the Meccan period, it wasn't, you guys are aware of this, I'm sure, it wasn't a lot about laws. You should or shouldn't, drink, or you should or shouldn't. This is how inheritance happens and stuff. That stuff was later, sah. The initial bit was just putting that seed of Iman, that ethics, that Islamic epistemology into their heads. The rest of it comes easy. If you can raise a child who doesn't even know Juz Amma off by heart, right? Just has enough, hifz to pray. But that kid has a strong understanding of who the Prophet ﷺ was, who Allah is, what they want from us, what it means to be a good person. You don't need to worry about that kid. You don't need to worry about that kid. Even if they have a bit of wobble at university, and they often do, that kid will come back. If you produce a hafiz who doesn't understand that stuff, you're flying a kite with no string. Who knows where it'll end up? We know people. I'm sure you can think of people who have gone down both paths.
Yeah,
that's what I focus on with the youth work.
Beautiful. I think that's a nice outlook and a nice end goal for if you were to try and raise a kid in the 21st century.
Yeah.
So bringing the podcast to a close, we've had so many different discussions regarding leadership, being involved outside of medicine, and community work as well. What's one piece of advice you'd give to somebody? What should we really be focusing on in this day and age?
So, man, thank you guys again for having me, man. It's been enjoyable. We've talked about a lot, haven't we? But I think if I was just to say to your listeners one thing that I will ask them to do personally, right? Like, this isn't a hypothetical. This isn't visionary. You've got two options. Either you're a reading person or a listening person. If you're a listening person, there's a podcast by Yasir Qadi, Dr. Yasir Qadi. You may or may not have heard of him. He does a seerah, a podcast on the seerah, which is the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. 100-part series, right? Listen to it over a few years. This isn't like a stay up all night kind of thing. Start listening to that series, and he will go through in depth the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's life and times. Not every, obviously, lots of incidents about his life, how he grew up, how he acted before prophethood, how society was, how society changed. I highly recommend it. If you prefer reading, Dr. Salah Sharif has turned that podcast into a book. Yeah. Do you know what the book's called? Is it just
It's called Seerah of the Prophet, I think.
Seerah of the Prophet.
Yeah, it's very easy to find.
Yeah. So if you search Dr. Yasir Qadi Seerah or Salah Sharif Seerah, you'll be able to find that on Google. I highly, highly recommend. That's the one message I'll leave you with, right? If you haven't done it already, you haven't listened or read this material, read it. It will give you a completely revolutionized understanding of who the Prophet ﷺ was, and to some extent, what is required of you. If this is your role model, then it should inform how we think, what we do in life, and how we act in life. So yeah, that's a bit of advice for the listeners.
Amazing. Jazakallah khair. I think that's a really nice, practical way to round it up. And we really hope that all the listeners can take something on board to become those change makers in their communities beyond medicine, whether you're a med student or not.
Thank you so much for coming today, Dr. Omer.